Hello everyone, welcome back to today's episode of
Spectre,
Spectre
Spiel,
Spiel. Two girls.
and scary stories.
So in the last episode, we shared the story about an Japanese urban legend, Hachishaku-sama. In today's episode, I'll be sharing three stories about Korean urban legend. So let's get on with today's episode. So, our first story is about a Korean urban legend which is known as 1212. So, in South Korea, um, it is very important for young people or the kids to do well in school, and their parents put a lot of pressure on them. And I guess that's not only the case in South Korea, but I guess it's the same everywhere.
Everywhere.
So, this is about a girl named Suni. Even she was going through the same thing, and she was studying in a library once, and it was getting quite late. And it was not like she was alone, there were other kids as well in the library, and they all were studying, and it was quite late. And while she was studying, she took a break and she went to the washroom. And while she was in the washroom, the other kids who were there in the library, they heard a very distinct noise about someone who was like there outside the window, and like a screeching sound, like kind of. So they all tried to locate where the sound was coming from, and they saw outside one of the windows of the library there was a lady who was pushed against the window, like one of her cheeks was pressed against the window pane, and her eyes were closed. It was as if someone had pressed her against the window pane. And they were quite confused, and all were looking in that direction, when suddenly she opened her eyes, and they all noticed that she did not have eyeballs. It was a hollow space in her eyes. And she opened the window and came inside, and everyone started yelling and screaming, looking at her. And she looked a little scary. I mean, obviously, so
Yeah.
if someone doesn't have eyeball, they will look scary. So they all started screaming and yelling. And as soon as the screaming and yelling started, it even stopped within few seconds. So Suni, who was in the washroom, she was unaware of all the situation. She didn't even hear anything. And yeah, because it started and stopped so quick. So it was not like it was going on and on for quite a long time. It was like matter of few seconds. And she was washing her hands, and suddenly the lights went out. So she stopped for a few seconds, but then she continued. She washed her hands, she came out, and when she went into the library, she saw that the bodies of all the students were strewn around. Like a few bodies were sprawled on the floor, somewhere on the table, I mean, on the desk, on the chair, everywhere. It was just laying around. And those, like, it was like there was a great massacre had happened in the library, and she didn't come to know about it. And it was like eerily quiet. So she was looking around when suddenly she heard footsteps coming from outside, and it seemed as if the footsteps were coming inside the library. So her instincts kicked in, and she hurried and just laid down beside one of the dead body. and she acted as if even she's dead. So she heard someone coming into the library, so she shut her eyes closed. So she heard a female voice going, one, two. And then after a few pause, again, one, two. And then after some time, again, one, two. So out of curiosity, she opened her eyes and saw that there was this lady who was very slim. She was like tall, slim, and she was going from one dead body to another dead body and saying one, two. And then again going on to the next dead body and saying one, two. And then again going to the next dead body and saying one, two. So she got really scared and she shut her eyes closed. So, but the counting did not stop. Like it was on the loop. Like she was going from one dead body to another dead body and saying one, two, and after some time again one, two. But now the sound was coming closer and closer towards her, and she could even hear the shuffling, like her walking closer and closer towards her. So she felt like it was few dead bodies away, and the counting was still going on. One, two, and then one, two. So she was feeling very scared to even open her eyes. So the next thing she knew was the counting came from right next to her, the body which was lying next to her. That woman, that the one who was counting, she was standing quite close to her. So it again said one, two. And then she heard her walking, but then it stopped. And then it was silence. So she was quite scared to open her eyes, and she was not moving at all. She just lay there like a dead body. But then there was no sound. The counting had also stopped. But she was quite scared to open her eyes and see what was going on. So she lay there like for quite some time. And then when she felt that, okay, now there is nobody, and that woman, whoever she was, who was counting, is probably gone, she opened her eyes like very slowly and peeked at what was going on. And when she opened her eyes, she saw that woman was standing right above her with her fingers pointed towards her eyes. And she said, one, two, and plucked her eyeballs out.
I guess that she was counting the eyeballs, but then I waited for you to complete. I wanted to hear the whole story.
So you guessed it.
Yeah, I guessed it.
When I was reading the story, even like when I was reading it about one, two, even I guessed it that maybe it is that she wanted the eyeballs, but then I was like, let's read it. So let's move on to the next story. So, our next story is about the right eye. And it is a scary Korean urban legend about a young woman who had received a cornea transplant. And they say that this urban legend has inspired the horror movie The Eye.
Okay.
Yeah, have you seen that?
No.
No, I'm not, but I'm quite curious to see it now. And I guess even you will be after hearing this story. So, there was this young woman in Korea who was blind in one eye. So, eventually, she received a cornea transplant, and the operation was successful, and she was released from the hospital. However, a week later, she stopped going to work. Her friends couldn't get in touch with her. And when her parents called, she didn't answer her phone. Eventually, her parents got worried and went to her house. They knocked on the door, but there was no reply. They called the police, and the police people broke down the door, and they found that the young woman was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. she had sliced her own wrist open and bled to death. Her parents were devastated. They couldn't understand why their daughter would take her own life. And the police noticed that all of the mirrors in the house had been smashed. All the reflective surfaces in the house, like the window and everything, that all those things were covered as well. When they came across the young woman's diary, they found something strange sprawled on the last page, over and over again. And she had written, "My right eye is staring at me, my right eye is staring at me, my right eye is staring at me." She had written that continuously many times.
Okay.
So her right eye was like staring back at her.
Okay.
I know this is very short, but don't you think it's scary? Like, what if you feel like your own eye is staring back at you? Isn't that like very scary?
Yeah. For a moment, I thought that she was seeing someone else because, yeah,
She was seeing ghosts or something.
yeah,
Yeah, there are many movies like that, right? Like
yeah.
you get eye transplant and you
You
start
start seeing
seeing,
someone else.
yeah, or ghosts or spirits. So this is something new. So I think the movie will also be very interesting.
Yeah.
So that's on your watch list next, right?
Yes.
The Eye.
The
So the next urban legend is about the man in the elevator. It is a scary urban legend from Korea about a girl who lives on 14th floor of her apartment. And this story is also known as the elevator murderer or the elevator killer.
Okay.
So there was a 19-year-old girl named Haruko who was attending university in a very large city. And one night she had to stay late in the library to finish her project. And it was almost dark by the time she came back home. And as I mentioned, Haruko lived in on the 14th floor of an old apartment building. And when she came back, she stood in the entrance and pressed the button to call the elevator. She always hated it when she came back so late in the evening, and it just didn't feel safe. She didn't like going through the elevator to the 14th floor alone. So when the elevator came, she stepped inside and pushed the button for a floor. Just as the doors were about to close, there was this man, a handsome man. He came running up, and the man was out of breath, and he put his hand to stop the doors from closing, elevator doors from closing. And he stepped into the elevator and stood beside him. And then he said, "Oh, you live on the 14th floor?" So he said that because the 14th floor's button
Button
was
was-
lit up.
Yeah.
So then Haruko replied, "Yes." So then he was like, "Oh, I live on the 13th floor." So he said that, and the elevator started going up, and he pressed the 13th floor button. And through the windows in the elevator door, Haruko saw the floors go by as they both stood there in silence. So she stole a few glances at the man, and she was like, "He certainly is handsome." And she was wondering if he would ever be interested in dating her. Like, obviously,
Yeah.
what you will have that thought when you see a handsome man. Right? So, um, and then he happened to suddenly look at her, like he was like he just turned and looked at her, and she was like batting her eyelids and smiled sweetly at him. So then the elevator stopped at the 13th floor. Like, they reached 13th floor.
Yeah. Okay.
Sad, right?
There's one moment.
A small moment. So the doors opened, and the man stepped out, and he said, "See you later." And Haruko immediately, yes, yes, see you later. And the doors of the elevator started closing behind him. And the man suddenly turned around and he pulled out a sharp knife out of his jacket and said in a very dark and menacing voice, upstairs. So it was like he did not complete his sentence. He was like, see you later. And then he pulled
Upstairs.
out the knife and was like, upstairs. And as soon as he said that, he started laughing like maniac and ran towards the stairs. And the elevator door had shut and started going upstairs to 14th floor. And the girl was like terrified. She did not even know what to do. And the she was like in very panic mode, and she desperately tried to like push all the buttons with her fist and trying to get the elevator to stop, but it was of no use. And when it reached the 14th floor, the doors opened and the man was there with the elevator with the knife. He was already standing there waiting for her. So, this is the story actually. In Korea, people say that this is a true story, and the girl was found dead, stabbed to death in the elevator. And people say that the worst part was her death itself, but rather the sheer horror she experienced in between like 13th and 14th floor. She was trapped in that elevator and she knew that she was going to die once she reaches 14th floor. So they claim that this is the reason that all elevators now have a stop button.
Yeah, I was about to say
Yeah.
there are
So,
stop buttons.
yeah, so
Yes.
it probably was not there when this incident happened, when the
Okay.
incident took place. So after that, now they have stop buttons.
Okay.
So I would have even I would have panicked a lot in that situation. Like imagine she was going from 13th floor and to 14th floor, and she knew that once the door opens,
She's gonna die.
she's gonna die. That's so sad, right?
Yeah. I think I would have made my bag as a weapon
Use
and
your bag.
and shoved it in his face to
You
run
block
away.
his vision
Yeah,
and then
block
run
his-
away.
Yeah, everything that I have in my hand, I use it.
Yeah, he'll shove it.
throw it at him. So I could
I think that's
run
a good
away.
self-defense. But then, in such cases, when you're in a panic, you never know what
Yeah.
you'll do. Like, maybe you come up with a plan, or maybe you
you
are
just stand
quite,
still, yeah.
yeah, you don't even have that in you to come up with a plan to like save yourself. So,
When you first said the title, I thought this was going to be another elevator game story where you like go into another dimension.
okay, by the title of the story.
Yeah, the elevator.
No, but even that is a great story. Let's like share it some other time.
Yeah.
So, Ashita, out of the three stories which I shared today, which one do you think you liked the most?
The second one, the right eye.
The right eye?
The right eye staring at me, the right eye staring at the right eye staring at me.
Okay.
That's really creepy. What about you?
For me, I think the first one was really scary. Like, I really liked it. 1, 2, 1, 2.
One, two.
Yeah, I like the state that the girl was in. She was like,
Yeah.
she closed her eyes and she was just listening to everything. It's quite scary.
And when she opened her eyes,
Yeah.
finger pointing at her.
And then she said 1, 2.
1, 2.
Yeah, so that like gave me the chills.
From where did you find these stories?
I actually came across these stories in Reddit, and I thought that why not share it in the podcast?
Okay.
Yeah. So I hope you guys liked today's stories. I hope you guys enjoyed and got chills listening to this story.